Litigation was going forward. I want to move it. Well, no, I don't understand. I mean, I'm representing the association.
Hand this out to Jason. I used to work in construction. Should I hand this out ahead of time?
Sure.
Or did you want me to wait until everybody gets
Well, wait for the research.
before the meeting starts? I'll hand it
All right.
to everyone. Tax abatement in your package, and then I just handed out to you that spreadsheet, which I will have Jim now go over with you, and it's basically breaking down what it would have been if we didn't have a tax abatement, and now what it would look like if now going into it like this. And I'll have Jim explain how he came up with those numbers. Yeah, no, I know, it's small, Jim. I'll get to that page too.
No.
Unfortunately, it's still a little blurry when we bring it to the screen.
I don't need to get really too far into the concept of the tax abatement, but the misconception that many people have is that a tax abatement is effectively the city writing a check to the developer and foregoing millions of dollars of income. Right now, you have a pool table, you have an empty lot that's not producing any income at all. These guys are going to build this beautiful concept of an apartment complex that will, at some point, as the spreadsheet shows, you produce over $1 million in taxes in the end of the 10th year when we get the thing up and running in full capacity. So what we've done in this analysis here is we've done a comparative analysis of what would the taxes be in the event that there was no abatement, using a valuation of the property in the third year that we estimate to be about $37 million, and a 70% assessment, and a current mill rate of, what's it,
39.87.
27. In any modeling exercise, we have to make some assumptions. And of those two assumptions that I made, I kept the mill rate static for 10 years. That's not realistic, but if I make any assumption that the mill rate's going to go up or down, it's just fanciful and it just makes the model irrelevant. I also do not make any assumption regarding the increase or decrease in valuation in the 5-year revaluation, because who knows what the economy bears. So what I've done in any modeling exercise that is done in any financial modeling with this type of exercise, you just maintain those variables to be static. That said, if you look at that last page, if you that she's got on the screen here, in the event that we exercise the tax abatement in Article 5 of the Tax Incentive Program for the City of Stratford, Article 191.9, with the abatement for the first 3 years of 100%, then going down 20% a year, or is it 10%? Yeah, 80%, 70, 60. You can see it in the analysis. Years 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 through 10. The taxes paid over 10 years are about $3.6 million. Had there been no tax abatement, it would have been over $10 million with a full tax assessment of $26 million and a $37 million valuation. It would have been $1,046,000 a year in taxes. Again, this is not lost revenue. This is opportunity money that the city is foregoing to entice a developer, and any developer, to do this type of transaction. If you compare the tax abatement with the full tax assessment, you're talking about $6.8 million forbearance of the taxes that would have been paid. Now that said, you're not losing money per se, because you have, on 154 units, you have well over 200 people living here, call it 200 people, but those 200 people are spending, on average, this is just a national statistic, about $25,000 per person in local economy, groceries, pharmaceuticals, things along those lines there. That's $5 million they're spending in the economy. You also have those people paying taxes on their cars. If it's $300 per person, or there's $60,000 or so in taxes that the town is earning. This forbearance is not lost revenue. There was that whole issue that happened in New York when Amazon was coming into Long Island, and they made a big issue of thinking that they were giving Amazon, this big company, a tax break. And they killed the deal, and they lost billions of dollars because they thought forbearance was the city actually writing the check. That is not the case. This is the city deferring the revenue that they will be earning in any developer, not just the Vermont ones. Any developer asking for this is doing the same thing, and that's what your Article 5 is allowing. So while this shows a $6.8 million deferral of taxes, it will eventually be well over $1 million in taxes upon full assessment, upon the abatement of the tax program. I don't know if there's any questions on that. I can certainly address them.
Just so I don't forget, we are going to So, if I heard you correctly, there was an increase in construction costs of about $6 million.
Well, there was I did those numbers, and candidly, what happened was when I did the original underwriting, we had incorporated a certain amount of underground parking, and then they came back and they told me you needed 180 underground parking.
And the building got larger, so it went from 22.
So I came up with the additional cost of another developments that I put together. I used an additional cost of about $25,000 per space for the additional parking with $4.5 million, somewhere in that range. And that bumped that part of it up. And then the additional square footage from the units from 141 to 154 plus the other incremental numbers.
Right. So where I was going is that you're asking the town to abate 6.8, we had the increase in construction was only $6 million. So, and I shouldn't say only, I don't mean it that way, but I'm saying $800,000 delta. I'm just trying to understand.
Again, it's a modeling exercise. I could, I hate using this expression, but it's very accurate. Figures lie and liars figure. I could have easily lost that $800,000 by making it work into that increment, but it doesn't work because I don't want to make assumptions that are irrational. I don't want to assume what the mill rate is going to be over 10 years. I don't want to assume what the value is going to be in 5 years. So while I'm using current construction costs, things are a little crazy right now. I don't know if you go into Lowe's or Home Depot to buy a piece of lumber, but $75 for a sheet of plywood that cost $25 a year ago is a different world. So we're modeling.
Yeah.
It's not a perfect science by any stretch of the imagination, and I'm not making that assurance. That's the way the numbers work out. I understand that there is a delta, but candidly, I could be very wrong. I could be wrong in the other direction as well.
I'm sorry, I want to make sure I understood the numbers. I wrote down, I thought you said it was 22 million and you went to 30 million, was it?
Correct.
So 8 million?
Yeah, it's really 8 million.
8 was 22 to 30.
It was.
In construction costs.
So
Well, no, there was also land cost.
Yeah.
The land factor is
That were down 6 million increase in construction costs.
The land factor has to be used as well.
Right, so, but it did increase from, it was 22 million for our construction costs, and it did raise to 30 million.
We used 175,000 square foot for construction, which is, with the development I'm working on in downtown Shelton, on those apartments and things along those lines, 175 is a stretch. I think we can get back to 175. I'm inclined to think it's going to be higher, and Mark and I have had this discussion many times. That's why I put the incremental cost of $25,000 per space for the additional parking when they came back to me and told me that the city was requiring the underground parking for the Board of Education. I am comfortable with $175 a square foot. The additional square footage on the incremental 141 to 154 units, whatever it was there, resulted in that cost increase. And then the additional parking underground was another $4.25 million, somewhere in that range. So, I mean, the numbers are during the slide during the presentation, or at least the package you sent out with the budget.
I just wanted to mention, because you were basically trying to compare our cost increase with the tax abatement number, which, right, our costs are more like almost 8 million versus you were saying the tax abatement 6.8. But one other cost that did raise in this, I said our soft costs stayed the same, but our interest on the project raises. So we obviously, the project in that new number of the of the 34 million, we now have interest that we are paying as we build for construction because of the fact that the dollar amount is larger as well.
Yeah,
So there's a lot of moving numbers in there.
But I understand your concern about the delta. And that's where the misconception comes into play about, I'll use the term fabricating, because that's what this is. The forgiveness of this $6.8 million is really not cash out of pocket. This is forbearance, this is abatement of that money that is going to be earned. Yet the city is still going to be earning because we have 200 and some odd people who are going to be taxpayers living in this town, living in the community, shopping at the grocery stores. They're going to be paid. They're going to be paying taxes on their cars. This property is not earning taxes for you right now. It will eventually turn up to this point here. Again, it's a modeling exercise. I could be wrong. I could have switched the numbers around to make it work. I could have eliminated that delta with just a simple movement of the decimal point. But that's not the way I operate. I want to make sure that I thought things were, and that's the way I model for many other towns. I want to make sure that things are done consistently and to a point that people can understand that there is no chicanery involved in coming up with these numbers.
No, I appreciate that. I think it'd be, I don't know if foolish is the right word or not, but I think it'd be, I'm going to say that for both sides to think that this is going to be the end result of the numbers, right? Because we're talking about, based on your schedule, probably 2.5 years out before this thing starts getting implemented. There's going to be a lot that's going to happen in the world, right? That's going to possibly move these numbers up and down. You get on a very good point. Materials are about to lose. Materials have come back down by about 40%. And so they're on a decline, but you can't assume that that's going to continue to decline. If this pandemic hits again, it may go through the roof. So I think it's more the process and the analogy of how you come up with the numbers and how you equate the numbers to the project. So at the end of the day, when we're both on you were successful bidders, everyone on both sides of the table, or the understanding of how we come to the numbers.
Well, again, my numbers, I'm very confident in my numbers because I'm involved currently with a number of these transactions going on now. As you rightly said, the cost of materials, it rises right like a rocket and falls like a feather. So the prices are coming down, but on certain things. Not the important things. Not the important things. So but that said, I'm using real numbers for existing ongoing projects happening now on Howell Avenue in Shelton, in Ansonia on Main Street. These are deals I'm involved with on the financing and development of myself. So I'm very confident in these numbers in today's. But you make a very good point. In 2 years, I could be completely off base. In 2 minutes. I mean, the Fed can make a change in the interest rates and then we have a whole different world. So it's all modeling, it's all assumptions, and anyone who's presenting to you who says otherwise, it's fanciful to say that they aren't making the similar assumptions. Anyone? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So that said, Team Romano's offer to purchase the property is $1.54 million. Came down a little bit, but it's still reflective of Mr. Romano's eagerness to get into this project. I think it's reflective of Mr. Romano and my commitment to the town of Stratford and all of our collective commitment to this project and hoping and seeing that it becomes a success. Again, the eagerness here, the desire to build out this project with Team Romano with the team of very experienced engineers, architects, financiers, leads me to the conclusion that it's going to work and it's going to be a success for our town. Just a couple of notes. We were very concerned about maintaining a good traffic flow in and out of the project, trying to take as much stress off Sutton as possible. We do have the rear access way coming up and we have two ingress egresses into this garage, which makes the flow smooth around the property. So we've taken in all the considerations taken in a lot of consideration for the neighborhood, as we discussed previously, and are excited to be one of the top two, and hope that you will consider selecting Team Romano so that we can then present to the town council and hopefully get and then the zoning commission. So if there's any questions, please have at it.
Thank you for the presentation. I think it was, I'll start. Did a great job, and again, we truly respect your time and effort put into it. I know you guys have spent a lot of time. Thanks for bringing on the expert, and the biggest expert in the right. I do have a few questions, though, if I may. So, my first question is, how did you come up with the value of the property? It was 1.5 to purchase the property. How was that established?
I actually used that number because candidly, that was the market rate I've established with other offers that have been put together in the other transactions I put together in Ansonia, and Shell. Originally it was higher per unit, but then with the request that the city came back with increasing the parking, we had to discount it a little bit. But candidly, I also own a real estate company, and I do a lot of commercial financing and sales, and am very aware of what the current market asking price is for developments like this that are available in the marketplace.
So you sort of did a, comparative analysis of
Comparative analysis.
not just within the town.
Not just throughout Connecticut, but regionally.
Yeah, appreciate that. And then along with that, how do you come up with the mix of the units? In other words, the 2-bedroom versus 1-bedroom versus studio?
That was in the RFP, wasn't it?
The reason I'm asking is because, as you saw when we did this development, well, I'll back up. The initial request was to get as much municipal parking as we could, and we have enough. Now, I understand. So the realization is the realization. However, if there were less 2-bedrooms, right, we created some public parking space. Not a lot, we might never get into parking spaces. But on the other hand, you do want to have a certain mix, I understand, to be able to listen to all different types of people coming into the conference. So I'm just curious how you come up with 150, 40.
Well, I thought the RFP had mentioned there was a target of 70% one-bedrooms. And that's where we started.
I don't believe we had a target. But I don't think we ever
I'm pretty sure on the RFP that was. And so, and we are beyond that number as it is. So I'd have to do the math quickly, but I think we're probably pretty easy. And then the reality is, based on the TOD parking 1.25, you have to do 4 2-bedrooms before you pick up one space. So you'd have to lose 4 2-bedrooms before you picked up one space because it's only 1.25. So the net benefit, you'd have to lose. I mean, if you change 16 2-bedrooms, in which case I think we only have 22, you'd pick up 4 parking spaces. I think we could find 4 parking spaces on the site somewhere.
Right. Okay. Thank you. If we took off the handcuffs, right, and said, here's a piece of property, what, if anything, would we do different? Maybe I think it's only about parking. But on the other hand, see, in our opinion, the underground parking adds a tremendous value to the property because it puts a lot more gradescape, and it is an absolute direct response to what occurred by both the Historical Society, by the town people, by the town politicians. I mean, pretty much everybody in town was screaming, as little surface parking as we possibly can get. So keeping that aside, what, if anything, we could do different with the property?
You took the words out of my mouth. I would love to reduce maybe 30 units, put the parking up above, put all the Board of Ed parking, screen it with green giants. But like you said, if you want everything on the ground, because if we could make a smaller building and just park on a building, we can get rid of the tax abatement.
And when a smaller building still make sense economically if you as a
If we just kept the parking under the
you're going to
building.
be like, this guy, no, because he may say, parking nuts. So I know there's a balancing act, right? Because if it gets too small, acquisition and everything else, you're not going to do anything. So I know there's a balancing act, but just, in generality, because let's face it, we did come back with some pretty strict requirements, but again, it was because it was responsive to the town. So, but I think it's important for us to know as a selection committee, when it comes time make our recommendation, that the town understands that, look, the alternative might have been this is what we are. So that's why I'm asking that question.
Well, we've had this discussion
Several times.
over and over, and I'm just going to speak from personal experience sitting there, up there. The tax revenue that is going to be foregone if an abatement is granted is going to be something that these guys are going to be interested in. You know, is it going to bring down the mill rate? Well, probably. Certainly, the mayor is going to be interested in that kind of thing too. But we understand the criteria. You guys were charged with this. You know, this is what you had to asked us to come back with. This is what you were charged with as a committee. So yeah, we know our feelings about it, but we know we can make this work. Either way.
And I also, oh, sorry, go ahead.
If I could say one thing. So an opposite response, one thing I would not change was the treatment we have in Sutton Place. I think it's really critical to offer that neighborhood to this larger project. Now, how many parking spaces could we generate if we built a 4-story building out to Sutton and had a much bigger parking field, you know, above and below? We could certainly achieve more parking spaces. But I think that the lower scale and the park that's going to be produced on Sutton, I think, is really a jewel. And then when you produce that and then set the larger building back further away so it's not hovering over the front buildings, really the footprint back there is really not that large. So there's not too much we can do. So I think we made a good choice. I wouldn't do anything different on Sutton.
So I think you just thanked us for that minute. I just want to reiterate one thing that I think I said earlier. Your first presentation versus this one, I just want to make sure it's the same. You have no intentions of flipping this after the 10-year rate?
None
So
whatsoever.
all I think of is, RBS goes away, so your intentions are long-term here?
Yes.
You're here to stay, and you're going to give us that.
My parents want a unit, they already picked out a unit in the building, so they can't sell it.
And we are a family-owned and operated business. So our other properties that we have, we do have a management company, but we are very hands-on. So we work together with them. So in our other projects, we had no desire either. This is something that obviously we want to grow in our portfolio and keep. And maybe one day if the kids want to get involved, they would, of course, come on. So like Mark has been a resident of Stratford, his entire life until we moved to Shelton with our children, but we're here to stay.
Now, to address again on that question, for the financial modeling, if you look on the analysis that they put together on the year 3 stabilized cash flow, I incorporated full taxation in coming up with the valuation for the abatement figure, because again, they have given you their intention as owners to maintain the property. I underwrite as if it's a commodity that can be traded. I incorporated that value with the idea that a tax abatement is or is not there. And that's why we came up with this situation. They have every intention of keeping this property. It's underwritten with evaluation incorporated for full taxation and evaluation in market rate, which is incorporated in the analysis.
Now, you mentioned that for your analysis, you figured the mill rate to be static, which I agree with that approach. The question becomes, if the mill rate increases or decreases, are you going to be looking to the town to take on more of an abatement or less of an abatement?
No, and actually, the way that the Article 5 reads, it's not a factor of the mill rate. It's actually just a percentage of whatever the assessment happens to be. Well, I guess it does correlate. It's 20% decrease per year, so it would be whatever the revaluation happens to be. So yes, it would be carried forward based on a percentage discount.
So we need to lock in that percentage.
Well, in accordance with, this is the Article 5, this is your document.
Yeah.
And Article 1911B, they have the discounting percentage of 100% for 3 years, then it goes down per year. So whatever the mill rate happens to be, the taxation correlates, but the discount.
The tax abatement this cites the ordinance, the tax abatement ordinance, so it's already in the books.
Yeah, the mill rate is going to change, but the discount is in the statute.
We do know our mill rate go down, so therefore, I think that's ahead.
Yeah, I mean, a couple clarifying, George covered a lot of things that was brought up, but Mark, you mentioned that if you had a clean slate and you didn't have any directives from us, that you would do underground parking, but only under the building. Can I hear that right? Is
Yes.
that what- and so you would reduce the amount of units based upon how much parking then you could get on the surface. So,
Yes.
so the idea of doing, I'm just kind of looking at as a site plan, just kind of imagining what that might be like, and how much of the parking is not under the building. And it's probably, I don't know if you know that, but probably at least half. Right, I'm guessing half the parking you're showing.
Just some
Underground.
suggestions, but it doesn't meet your criteria. If we lost this townhouse here, you currently have a parking lot in here that the Board of Ed uses. We could just make that surface parking for the Board of Ed. We could surround it by greenery, go back to the old building, and we lose all this underground parking here. It would,
I guess that's kind of where that is kind of where I'm headed. And just thinking about, you guys have, and I also appreciate the time and effort, so I know it goes into this, but I'm also just trying to get an understanding of, yes, that was our directive, kind of, I don't know how this is achieved, but, maybe there's some consideration of some middle ground there where, the cost of the project will reduce by reducing some of that underground parking just underneath the building, which is, part of cost of construction anyway. You're going to build that no matter what. And then, how would that be achieved? How many units are you losing?
well, we're very flexible, as you can see. We met all your suggestions, but if you guys wanted to reduce, I'd go for it.
And I also think that it's really for the Board of Education. So, I think if I'm a resident on site, I'm just thinking, I like to take every project, everything that we do, everything we build. A lot of the contractors get mad at me because I imagine if I was living there. So if I lived, say, on Sutton, and say Mark what he was just suggesting, Board of Education, they're just there during the day. I know that there's some meetings at night. I'm actually on the Board of Education in Shelton, so I'm aware of the meetings. But on the weekends, there shouldn't be anybody in those spots. So to me, when I'm home and I'm living there, I'm going to be seeing things at night. I'm going to be seeing things on the weekend. So even if you did something like what Mark was just suggesting and did it with greenery, there wouldn't be cars there on the weekends for them to look at anyways. It just, when you start, right, where the town, they would be seeing the parking lot, but if we hit it with greenery, they wouldn't even be seeing the parking lot anymore. Because the Board of Ed isn't going to be there on the weekends. So I think of like the residents of what they're seeing, when they're with their families on the weekends or at night.
And that's actually a good point. That I didn't think about, but you're 100% right. So in essence, we are providing, I'll call it after-hours municipal parking. Because when the Board of Ed staff leaves, we now have 60 spaces that could become public parking for people to come in and enjoy the rest of the center, the restaurants and the banks and all that other kind of stuff. How you control that, I'm not quite sure. You're kind of turning on and off a switch because you are going to have control parking over there. Residents this way, BOE this way, and isolation, separation, and all that stuff. So, but if it's in the foreground of the entrance, and then after the foreground of these gates, that, okay, residents only beyond here, then that is a way. So, in essence, we are doing some parking. That after hours, there is a big piece. People coming in on the train, and, before they go to the weekends, they get parking. So
In this plan, I'm sorry, I just want to be clear about this too. So in this plan, I think you're talking about 60 places underground that are dedicated to the BOE, and there are 121 or whatever it is dedicated to the unit. So, but those 60, there's not like there's a grouping of places how they did, right? In this plan, it's not like okay, this section is.
Yes, we would do that. We would have to do that. We'd probably put signage maybe along this wall and here, keep it as close to the Board of Ed as possible. And put the signs you see in parking garage, parking for board, staff Board of Ed only.
So to George's point, then somehow if there were some controls in place that could be used for, you know, all the restaurants in the center, things like that. Yeah.
But we would definitely want to hide it with some greenscapes.
No, underground too, but
They did a very good job, I think, down in Sona, with that type of arrangements that they have, and also in Haven, where they have isolation of residents versus municipalities, so I think it's very achievable.
Well, that's the essence of mixed use.
That's right.
Because some people are working at night, some people are taking the train into New York, or, you know, some people work at night, some people work during the day, and, you know, businesses aren't open at night, as the Board of Ed is not open at night, typically, except for crazy events that happen. But that said, yeah, you guys hit on the issue of how we thought about the parking.
Well, see, Amy just she's working this well, that's why she came here. So, I'm gonna go back one more. So the parking, if the town had nothing underneath, there's a certain cost to this project that you're gonna pay the parking for the residents. So was that taken into consideration in the financial analysis of what the town would pay, what market company would have to pay, no matter what?
My incremental cost, I figured, because of that change, was in excess of what, 4.2 million? In that range. In the initial overview that we presented, or they presented, I wasn't here, we had incorporated a certain amount of underground parking. And then when the change came through, I was calculating based upon what Bob Simpson and other people have built in Shelton and what their cost of parking garages were into this analysis. So that analysis has the incremental overview, not what was already there. It's the additional cost.
In the analysis, it says that in your proposal, I just want you to make sure that the analysis basically says that ongoing, there'll be no cost to the town for rental spaces, right? So that BOE is in perpetuity, that parking for the BOE is in perpetuity of the project.
Yes.
Correct, with no cost to the town.
Correct.
Now,
I just had a question on the engineering side of things, like traffic impacts. How much do you think that this will impact on Main Street circulation?
We haven't done a full study of that, but, you know, I think the impact will be minor, because we're going to be coming out on, right next to Main Street, and, you know, a lot of people will be like the train. I would imagine quite a few people will walk the train.
Considering that this is a DOD, is there an opportunity to provide bike parking in more some spaces, or in addition to some spaces? Because you have excess parking there.
Oh, yeah, we were going to provide possible parking. We haven't had that level of detail.
Because we will be having our Main Streets on Main Street though, so I just was thinking maybe something we could like a bike to the station.
You know, I'm sorry.
You can go.
Given keep in mind the traffic flow, here's East Broadway, in and out of East Broadway. There's certainly the exit way that we would take a right and go out of Sutton if they chose to do that. Not sure who would choose to do that. But you also have the rear access way from Main Street along I-95 that comes up to the stripe. So there's quite a bit of flow for traffic. All that should take off the burden off of Sutton, certainly, and just make it easy to get in and get out of the place.
So where is this?
That's East Broadway.
Okay, what's this house? That's
That's the old Copper
Copperpot's house, so
Sir,
Excuse me,
sir,
what's getting taken down, Blando's?
Sir, you have to sit. This isn't open public for questioning.
Yeah, but I didn't understand what he was showing.
Sir, the committee's asking the questions. You can sit down.
Yeah, but he's trying to
Finish
show-
this lady, but this is for the committee to question.
I'm part of the committee.
No, you're not. You're listening. You're the public.
It's proposed that there would be a driveway here to East Broadway. That was understood as part of the proposal. We take down the garage that's there currently. That's what's
we're
proposed.
using town property to accommodate.
Correct.
I think it's a good proposal. Thank you for your help.
Thank you.
Patrick, did you have any questions?
No, actually, was going to ask the same thing that we got. So I have, she answered my question with the entrance and egress, so thank you.
Jamie, were you done?
I think so. I was,
Go ahead.
well, the parking thing, Mark, I just wanted to understand, sort of, can you go back to that underground parking? And I'm just wondering, you know, if you eliminated parking that's not near the building, do you know about how many, I'm trying to count quite, about how many spots is that?
The original
That are
plan?
not underneath the building?
I think we added 100 spaces, at least 100.
Yeah. We're gonna go back to the original plan. As a
Not the
comparison.
alternative, correct, right?
Yeah, that one.
This one,
That one, it shows 80 spaces.
82 spaces.
82. So roughly 99 spaces we added on the ground.
But some of them are underneath the larger building,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
That's, so my question is, how many spots in the newest scheme are not underneath the building?
I would venture a guess of 70 to 75.
All right, so fairly close to the number of spaces that are account, what we have stipulated is a requirement for the Board of Education in that neighborhood. That's what I'm going, what I want to clear in my own head. Okay.
Can you share the renderings?
You want to go back to the renderings?
Yes, the sectional views.
The first ones, sure. Well, these were the originals.
No, the ones before, the architectural sectionals where you showed underground parking.
Oh, sure. The old or the new?
It's only in the,
Oh, it's only in the old. Sure. I'm getting there.
Yeah, this.
This one?
no, there's one more
there is
section.
One more?
There's the
There we go.
So, this is how it would work for every single building in the center.
Not the townhouses, the main building, yes.
Do you think there is a demand for that much of development, like in terms of occupancy?
Yes. Yes, again, I also own a real estate company, and we're leasing up the properties on Howe Avenue in Shelton, and we have a waiting list for people who are still under construction. And they're getting $1,250 for 500 square foot studios and $1,650 for one bedrooms with their eyes closed. This is right at the train station. There will be a demand, this thing will be leased up before it's even built.
There are a waiting list for most of Metro Star's, all Metro Star's buildings in Milford that are near the train station, waiting lists. And the rentals are just keep going up because the demand is so great.
And how do you know?
And I can use Milford as an example because we represent one of the major developers. My firm represents one of the major developers in Milford. It's very similar to this type of project.
And oddly enough, it's not just young professionals, it's actually seniors. People are selling their houses at outrageous profits, and they want to stay around here because they have kids and grandkids around, and they want to have an apartment around here, access to this to New York, but they want to go to Florida or Arizona, whatever. So it's amazing the number of seniors who are actually buying versus young professionals, or renting, I should say, versus young professionals.
I just have one last question. Will there be an on-site manager to manage things?
No, I think everybody else covered anything that has passed.
Yeah, just a point of clarification. So regarding the one-bedroom units, Ted just checked the regulations. The RFP kicks you over to the TOD regulations, and in the TOD regulations, it asks for a minimum of 7% wet bedrooms. That's where we got it. The main building has about 84% wet bedrooms. All the units on Sutton are 2 bedrooms, but when you mix that all together, we're still over 7%.
Thank you, appreciate that. Good. Do you have any questions of us?
I think we're good. Thank you.
Why do you want 60 spaces for the Board of Ed on the ground? I said, why would you like 60 spaces for the Board of Ed to be on the ground?
Just because of the mass of the population that we reached out to, whatever community you want to be in, they don't want service for, I think, everybody understands that it's going to come as a premium, but I think, again, as an architect myself, I think it's money well spent on all parties. I think it really does enhance the quality of the project. It really enhances the surroundings of the project. The beautiful part that you have up front. out, enhance that even further. So I think everything about the project, and the less pavement, the better chance it has to be received by, as you mentioned, people here. So that's our goal.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, sure, thank you. Oh,